We are joined by Butima Namela, a member of the National Executive Committee of the ANC. Good afternoon, and thank you for making the time to join us at such short notice. So I don't know how much of the conversation with Professor Defo you caught, but there are a number of themes that I believe you and I will be able to touch upon. But before we do that, just for the benefit of our viewers who may not be, so deeply entrenched in the politics of the ANC and the movement and the alliance as a whole, what is the NGC? Why are you having this meeting?
Thank you very much, Tulasizo, and I've just had a few. Just the last question that I've joined in as you asked the other guests and their response, and I'll touch on those just a bit later. But just on the NGC, that's the National General Council. It's basically a mid-term conference, and the intention is to make an assessment of the progress that has been made since the last conference, which was in 2022. So we'll basically be receiving a political report from the president, which is an assessment of the political situation in the country, which will look at both the political state of the organization, will look at the international situation. It will also look at, the question of our society, the state, as an instrument the ANC government has used to transform the lives of the people, how far we've gone, to that extent. It will also receive a state of the organization from the Secretary General, which will look at the state of our branches, our performance in the last elections, our preparation for the next local government elections, but also, issues around the state of our provinces, the state of our regions, but also what needs to be done. And then I think finally to also have a political discussion which is anchored around the base documents which we referred to, and various other documents which will focus on specific themes that will guide not just the assessment, but also provide some way forward. So it is basically a meeting of delegates. It's not as expansive as the national conference. Sure. So it's an assessment, but also a plan for the next conference.
Right.
So that's what it basically is.
So you bill it as the second highest decision-making structure or body of branches and members of the ANC, of course, after the conference that happens every 5 years, with the National Executive Committee being the highest decision-making body in between conferences. But in terms of ranking, you say the NGC is the second highest. Do you understand then some of
the NEC will be reporting to the structures of the organization what its activities have been over the last 2.5 years, midterm.
Given that billing, do you understand then why so much intrigue surrounds the question of whether or not, being as high a decision-making body as you bill it to be, whether or not there could be a push for a decision or some conversation to start about the continued tenure of President Cyril Ramaphosa, and also in the historical context, I suppose, that was set by the 2005 National General Council, and how it proved to be decisive in taking the ANC in a particular trajectory. Do you understand the intrigue that many have around those questions?
Well, there hasn't been in any history of the ANC, particularly since the introduction of the General Council Conference, serious discussion or changes around leadership. Yes, conversations always happen continuously within the organization around the future in terms of leadership, but there is no prospects. And in fact, although the NGC could venture into those discussions based on its assessment of the leadership's ability to implement conference resolution, so it could enter into those discussions, but this is not the primary issue. The role of the NGC is not elective. The role of the NGC is both assessment midterm, but also preparatory into the conference. And that's why it's anchored around the NGC-based document. And whose intention is to say, building up to the 56th National Conference, which is in 2029, what are the strategic areas that the ANC need to be looking at in terms of assessing the balance of forces, in terms of assessing where we are as a society, as the organization, as a people, and how do we move forward? And yes, I've had the latter part of the comments by the other panelist, I think it's Professor Tifo, around, the fact that we have had discussions around renewal, discussions around a whole range of things. Renewal is a continuum. It's not a stagnant process. It's a continuum, and that is why it's one of the things that we've anchored this conference on. We've also anchored it around the Freedom Charter. It's the 70th anniversary of the Freedom Charter, and we believe that the basic tenets of the Freedom Charter still remain relevant, and that they still inspire, the aspirations that not only the ANC but also the Alliance and South African people, have always held in high regard. And finally, the National Democratic Revolution as the basis within which the ANC have been conducting, the South African Revolution, the South African theory of change has been informed by our conception of the National Democratic Revolution. And what is this? It's not something that's scary. It's basically the ANC saying that, South Africa is a country of all of us who live in it, black and Africans, white, colored, Indian, all of us, and that we have to be united. We have to build that national unity. We have to share in its prosperity. We have to recognize the gender equality of all of us. We have to recognize the potential of youth, of women, and all of us who live in this country. And that's what essentially the National Democratic Revolution, means. And that's what's anchored in that base document of the ANC. And basically to say that if this is what our revolution is, if this is what the Freedom Charter is, where are we now in taking forward all of those things? And what should be the approach of the forthcoming conference in all of those things?
Let me ask you this question, and it's a parting shot. The challenge you face in everything you've just said about the importance and centrality of the National Democratic Revolution, which is about transformation of society from, the vestiges and the legacies of colonialism of a special type, which is what you've characterized our society as having had as one of the features. The challenge that you face is that the language you speak will find resonance, for instance, among your alliance partners. But increasingly, the critique is that you speak the language, but in implementation, you are not pursuing the NDR. And it came quite sharply yesterday in the speech delivered by Solima Paila. He did not, just to be clear, he did not say directly that you are not pursuing the NDR, but his words were, there is a class war that is on the go, and its characteristics include privatization of critical sectors, the pipeline and network industries. That's something that you are doing in government. How does that square up with the NDR and the Freedom Charter, which was about people ownership of many of these important elements and heights?
Well, continuously, Tulas, there has not been a singular and coherent conceptualization of the implementation of the National Democratic Revolution within the alliance. If you draw it as back as pre-1994, where there were robust discussions about the direction the South African democracy should take. Each of the components of the alliance and various forces in society had different views around where we, should be going. And I think you would recall there were, deep ideological battles around gear within the alliance and, and so on and so forth. And I wouldn't want to go into that history. But what is important about this NGC and the discussions, that is going to unfold is firstly that we are not oblivious to the fact that the need for unity is urgent and that the need for unity wouldn't take place on a blank page. The ANC, the SACP have been in constant discussions building up not only to this NGC, but also building up to the forthcoming local government elections in terms of retaining the alliance, retaining the direction of the National Democratic Revolution. And I think there's an appreciation that even if the alliance partners, COSATU, have got its own views in terms of how do we proceed, and similarly, SANCO and the SACP. So I think the realization is that from the ANC grounding itself in how we advance the National Democratic Revolution and this current phase of that revolution, we obviously have to take our alliance partners along. And that is not going to be an easy, project, but it is not a project with the ANC itself, is going to be giving up on. We believe that, we should remain, all of us, hands on deck in ensuring that we build a non-racial, non-sexist democratic society and that the prosperity of all our people depend on the efforts that we put, also in government. So unity is going to be sacrosanct, not just of the ANC, but also of the alliance and of the plus forces that are meant to drive the National Democratic Revolution.
All right, I've got to leave it there. Thank you for joining us. That's Buti Manamela, member of the National Executive Committee of the ANC, just teasing out some of the discussions that will be happening as the ANC holds its National General Council from the 8th to the 11th of December.